snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I am here today in my new uni house. I hope you guys can appreciate this little setup that I've got going on. I bought my little mini bookshelf that I have at home with me, and then the books have already spread to behind me. So fun times, but I'm here today to do some book reviews, so you'll probably see me in this location for a little while. The first book review that I'm going to be reviewing I actually did as a buddy read. I read this with Mercedes and Ange, whose channels I will link down below. Definitely go and check them out, they're both lovely, lovely people. And we read Slammerkin, which is by Emma Donoghue. This is the first Emma Donoghue that I'd ever read. I haven't read Room, although I do own it and I'm quite excited to read it after enjoying this one. And I haven't really read any of her other stuff either. So I was quite excited to give this a go. It is a historical fiction. I don't tend to read a lot of historical fiction, but it is actually something that I do really enjoy. So I was quite excited to get into this one and see what it was all about and exactly when it was set. This is a fairly standard coming of age story. It focuses on a young girl who is called Mary Saunders, and Mary Saunders is a young girl. She lives at home with her mother and her stepfather. Her father died when she was very, very young, so she never really knew him, but she knows her mother, and her mother is very, very strict. Her mother has her best intentions at heart. She definitely wants Mary to do well in the world, but honestly she goes about things in the wrong way. She's rather horrible to her daughter and she doesn't really appreciate anything that Mary does. This is set in the 1700s and she is quite a lucky child in that she does go to school and she actually completes her education, but because of the relationship that she and her mother have, which honestly is not much of a relationship, she decides that she doesn't want to continue and be a seamstress like her mother or take up that sort of career. She wants to do her own thing, and she goes out one night very late and she gets into a bit of trouble when she meets this peddler, and she gets into quite a lot of trouble and she goes home to her mother and her mother chucks her out the house. So she's on her own from that point onwards in the story, and we don't really know what's going to happen to her other than she's completely alone in the world. She may be educated, but that's not going to get her far, and so she ends up on the streets of London in the 1700s as a young girl aged about 14. Not an ideal situation, and basically we follow Mary's life as she goes through the process of trying to fit into London society, trying to make her way in the world so that she can live and survive and have a bit of money on the side. And honestly she doesn't do a great job, but I really, really enjoyed the initial section where she was on the streets of London discovering herself, sort of discovering a lot more about the inner workings of London and how everything was, and the way that she would have to sell herself out essentially to become something and to get money and to be able to live a life. She definitely likes luxurious things. She has a real sort of passion for clothing and she sees fine clothing and she thinks it's beautiful. Probably this is something that comes from her mother being a seamstress, and she really does have an appreciation for fine clothing and fine materials. Got two sections to this book. The first section, as I said, is her in London, and then the second section she travels away from London and she goes all the way almost into Wales, and that section was interesting. It definitely was interesting, but I didn't find it quite as exciting as the London sections, mainly because I think London is just a fascinating place, and especially in like the 1800s, I've always had a fascination with that era, and so I do love learning about that sort of thing, but sort of seeing the countryside and the more rural places was also interesting. I think Mary is a fairly spoiled child. She definitely thinks that she deserves more than what she's got in the world, and whether or not that may be true, she doesn't go about it in the right way. She gets into a lot of trouble, she gets into a lot of difficulty with her mother, with her family, and just generally with a lot of people that she meets, especially later on in the story. And the book actually opens with her being in jail, so we know that she ends up in a pretty horrible situation, and you go back in time to see how her story began and how she got there. And it is quite a dark story in places. It definitely has some violent scenes, but honestly they were done quite tastefully, I thought. It wasn't overly graphic. She was really interesting as a character to read about, and I enjoyed seeing what she was doing and who she was, and sort of discovering what it was like to be in the mind of a 14-year-old girl in the streets of London. It was quite an interesting adventure and journey that she went on in order to get from where she began to where she ends up, although it's not a great end. The ending could have done with a little bit more development. I would have liked it to be a little less abrupt. That was the main complaint I had with the book. Obviously I said I liked the first part a lot more than the second, but that doesn't mean I didn't like the second. I still really enjoyed all of the book. It was never a particularly hard read, and I definitely think that Donoghue's writing was sort of rough and ready. It didn't feel lyrical, but it felt like it was right in front of you and you could see everything unfolding in front of you, because it was very descriptive and you did see a lot of the sort of landscapes where she was, and the sort of places in London were described nicely, so there were some places that I could recognise and things like that. So I did enjoy the sort of rough and ready, down and dirty sort of style that she went for with the writing, and I thought that really worked. One of the things that I also really enjoyed was that we got a lot of quotes from sort of nursery rhymes or riddles that were of the time. I don't know if they were all genuine or whether she made some of them up, but they definitely sounded like they could have been genuine, and I thought that this really helped to authenticate the time period and make it feel as though we were genuinely in that time period, and really give you a little bit more into the background of what was going on and sort of the way that children were and interacted with each other in that time period. And all of the sort of rhymes and things that Emma Donoghue put into the story had a little bit more of a deeper significance when you sort of thought about what Mary goes through, so I did really enjoy that element. On the whole, I thought it was a fairly fast-paced and very interesting historical fiction. It was a fun read, it was an easy read. If it's something that you want to get into historical fiction, then this is probably a great starting point, and if you've read Emma Donoghue's other stuff, then you might well enjoy it. I hear that she's quite good at doing lots of different things, so I've not read her other styles of writing, but I did enjoy this. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so I would love to hear your thoughts. If you guys have read any other Emma Donoghue and you would recommend any of her books, then let me know, because I haven't really read many, as you guys know. And if you guys have not read this, or you have read this and you want to leave comments, then leave me comments down below. I would love to hear anything that you guys have to say. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all very, very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat about the